Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, great, you can do that. You can like the videos, but the most important thing you can do is tell your chess friends about the channel, Dan Heisman Chess. It's all about getting better at your game. I'm sure they'll like it. I've won the award for Best Video Instruction last year from the Chess Journalists of America. Enough said. Let's get to today's video. All right, usually in chess, it's better to have the move. For instance, why is white better in a chess game at the start of the game? Because it's his move. He gets to move first. He gets to start doing things. For instance, if you play e4, you can control some of the center. You open a line for a bishop. You open a line for the queen and give a knight an extra square. It's an advantage to have that move. So when it's your move, you can do things with your move that generally will improve your position, and it's good to be the one who's moving. I sometimes give an example of a difference between dynamic and static evaluation. Let's put the pieces on the board like this. All right, so I ask you who's better, and then everybody says to me, well, whose move it is? And I say, I don't know. Let's flip a coin to see whose move it is. And then I say, we're going to do that. Who's better? Well, the answer is it's 50-50. If I flip the coin and it's heads and white's move, then white's better. If I flip the coin and it's tails and it's black's move, then black's better, but it's 50-50. So here you clearly want to have the move because whoever has the move is winning the game. But in chess, there's occasionally circumstances where you don't want to have the move, or you'd like to give your opponent the move. I have in front of me a book called You Move, I Win by Alex Angos, which is all about Zugzwang. So let's first talk about what Zugzwang is and how to pronounce it. Zugzwang means the compulsion to move. It means in the game of chess, you can't pass. If it's your turn, you've got to make a move. Now, how do you spell it? Z-U-G-Z-W-A-N-G. Well, in English, that looks like Zugzwang. But as I've been taught, the Z in this particular circumstance, it comes from the German, is pronounced like sort of like an English TS. TS. The W is like the composer Wagner. If you've ever listened to The Ride of the Valkyries or something like that, he spells his name W-A-G-N-E-R, which looks like Wagner, but it's actually Wagner. Well, when you see Z-U-G-Z-W-A-N-G, think of the W as being from Wagner, and think of the Z's as being TS's, and now you get Zugzwang. Zugzwang is how you would pronounce it. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Zugzwang today, and let's come up with a position. I'm going to show you the 4 positions that are in the introduction to the Zugzwang book. Let's clear out the board, and he gives this position here, something like rook here, king here, and it says white to play and mate in 2 moves. All right, now if you try to do something aggressive to mate in 2, it doesn't seem to quite work. If you play like rook here, threatening rook down mate, then black's going to keep squirming like this, and you're not going to be able to mate him on the next move. Well, actually, you can mate him in 3 moves. What you could do is play rook here now, and now he isn't Zugzwang. He doesn't want to go in front of your king, but he is bound to move. Z-U-G, Zug, literally means move in German, and I assume Zwang means, compulsion or bound to move. So Zugzwang, you're bound to move. He has to move. He has to play here, and you mate him in 3. But we want to mate him in 2. How do we do that? Well, rather than moving the rook, we can move the king and create the same kind of situation. And now black has to move. He doesn't want to go here and let the rook come down, but he has no choice. He's in Zugzwang. He's compulsed to move, and plays king g1, and now rook checkmate. All right, the second example they give is white to play and mate in 3. Let's set that one up. There's a king here, pawn here, rook here, king here. White to play and mate in 3. And what white does is he plays rook to g4. Okay, now black has several choices. If he plays king h1, he gets mated in 1 with rook takes h4, so that's no good. So he either has to push the pawn or move the king. If he moves the king, then we do a little slidey rook maneuver here, And we just move the rook anywhere. And now again, he's under compulsion to move. He has to play king h2, and that lets my rook slide over and checkmate him. If you play rook to g4 and he pushes the pawn, then you simply attack the pawn with rook g3 or rook h4, and again, he's compulsed to move away from the pawn, and you take it off and you checkmate him. This idea of Zugzwang is very, very, very common in the endgame. A lot of times you can't win positions if you don't have Zugzwang. In fact, let's put the black king in the middle right now. Suppose we change the rules of chess and we say, white to play and checkmate black. He can take up to 50 moves for the 50 move rule, but we'll give black one additional capability, and that is black's allowed to pass his moves. So if white, for instance, plays rook to e3, black doesn't have to move away. He can just pass and say, I'll let you move. If we give black the chance to pass in this kind of position, if I remember correctly, it's impossible if black plays perfectly for white to checkmate black with a king and a rook against a king without using Zugzwang. You have to force him to move. Whether you're using the box method or whether you're using the other method where you get the king across from the king and then check him. If you go here, he doesn't have to move. He could just pass. And then if you move again, if we make a white's move again and he moves across, then he moves like this, and you can't force him to get across from you. So neither method will work if we give black the opportunity to pass. So you can't win this endgame, rook and king against king, without using Zugzwang. Let me tell you a story before I give the last two examples from the introduction. I was once watching a game at the World Open or the National Chess Congress, one of the big tournaments that the Adams marked before it moved downtown. And one of my better students was playing, and he reached an endgame position that was something like this. The black king was guarding the pawn. Maybe white's pawn was here. Maybe black's king was here. We'll give him a white pawn like that. And white had a bishop. And they got to this position, and one of my lower rated students was standing there next to me, and he whispers to me, draw. And I said, why do you think it's a draw? And he said, well, black only has one pawn left. It's on a light square. He's guarding the pawn, and he's just going to be able to draw because white can't make any progress and ever win the pawn. And I said, all right, let's watch and see. So white played something like king to d3. Black played king e5. White played bishop g3 check. Black played back there. White played here. And now black's in Zugzwang. He'd love to keep his king there, but he can't do it. He has to move away. His only legal move is to play back, and he doesn't want to let white in, so he has to play back. And now white can start coming up. Let's say black blocks him again, like king there. Now, white has lots of ways to do this. One of the easiest ways is to bring the bishop around the other side, on this side of the pawn. But we can probably do it without bringing the bishop around that side. We could probably play bishop g3, and when he plays king back, we can play bishop back. And when he plays... Oh, instead of bishop back, we should play bishop here. And now again, he's in Zugzwang. He can't go to the 6th rank. He has to go back. Let's say he goes straight back. We bring our king up. If he brings his king over here, we can play bishop here and force him all the way back and then win the pawn. So let's say he goes here, and now white plays king here, elbowing out the king. I don't even think we need the bishop anymore, because we're going to win this pawn and get a tic-tac-toe win. If you haven't seen my video on king and pawn against king, I'm pretty sure we don't need the bishop anymore. But anyway, we just have to make sure the bishop doesn't stalemate him. It's black's turn. He has to move out of the way. King here, king here, king here. And again, he'd love to be able to pass for the rest of the game here, but he can't. He's in Zugzwang. He could look for a way to maybe get a stalemate when white gets a queen. There's not going to be one, but he could look around for one. So king here, king takes, king up, king out of the way, king here. We get a queen and we win as long as we don't stalemate him. I always tell people when you get to these kind of positions, you're more interested in not looking to stalemate him than you are to checkmate him, because you will checkmate him if you don't stalemate him. So your number one goal is don't stalemate him, and your number two goal is to checkmate him. And if you achieve the number one goal, the number two goal should be pretty easy. So this position, if black could just pass for the rest of the game, my lower rated student would have been correct. Then black would have drawn the game by just sitting there and saying, I passed the whole rest of the game. But he can't do that, and he easily loses with Zugzwang here with a little care for white. All right, and the next Zugzwang example they give in the introduction is probably the most famous example of Zugzwang in chess, which is king and pawn against king with a pawn on the 7th rank. White king here. Now it's black's turn. If black says, I would like to pass for the rest of the game, there's no way white can make progress. He can't check him with a pawn. He can't check him with a king. The king can never get out of there. But if it's black's move and black has to make a move, he's in a very basic and very common Zugzwang position. He has to play king h7. White plays here. Black plays here. White makes sure that when he gets a queen, it's not checkmate. He plays queen here. Black plays here. Now, you could chase the black king all the way down the board with your king. But the fastest way to checkmate here is, believe it or not, Zugzwang again. You play queen here, and you force him to go back toward your king. So now black does not want to move to h6 because he'll get mated, but he can't pass. Not that he's going to save him. See, this game you can win without Zugzwang. If black could pass here, we could still beat him just by bringing the king up and mating him. But in any case, Zugzwang will make it faster here. He has to play king h6. And then we have queen h4 checkmate, and we have queen g6 checkmate. I almost always play queen h4 because it's the less obvious of the two checkmates. All right, the last example of the four in the introduction is what we call trebuchet. King on f5, pawn on f4, pawn on f5, king on g4. Why do they call this trebuchet? Because trebuchet was an ancient catapult that would throw rocks at the walls of the cities, and it sort of looked like this, had that kind of pattern. So they call this trebuchet, and trebuchet is mutual Zugzwang. In trebuchet, whosever move it is loses the game here. So for instance, if it's black's move, let's make it black's move, and white's going to bring the pawn down the board, he starts to come back, we block him off, he starts to come back, we block him off, he starts to come back, we block him off, he comes this way, we push the pawn, he tries desperately to wait, and we go, ole, get out of the way. He tries to stop, we check, he can't get in the way, we don't need Zugzwang here, and we get a queen. All right, so if it's black's move, black is losing. What if it's white's move? Well, then white's losing for the exact same reason. If it's white's move, we'll make it white's move. He has to move away from the pawns. If he goes up the board, that's silly. Black will just take, move out of the way, and get a queen. So he may as well try to come back down, but now he's going to lose exactly the same way I showed you with black. Black takes, white goes here. First block is king out. When he goes here, first block is king out. Now he's got nothing to do. We'll just push the pawn. And now we do the little ole maneuver. King here, ole. Doesn't matter where he goes. Check, he can't go there. Starts to run away. We get a queen. It's not stalemate. And so on. So trebuchet is mutual Zugzwang. Whoever is to move is going to lose. All right, let's pick up another example from the book. Let me pause to set it. Okay, in this example, it's white to play and win. Well, normally you can't checkmate with just a king and a knight. But if your opponent's king is very awkwardly placed and he has other pieces on the board that can block him in, the checkmate is possible, and in this case you can force it. So what's the first thing you have to do? Well, black is threatening to come out and then come down and try to get a queen. You could play knight here and then take off the pawn and get a draw. A lot of people would do that. But the right move here is to play king to f3 and put black in Zugzwang. Black would like to just sit here right now, but he can't. He has to move, and he has to play king to h1. All right, now it's white's move. What should white do? Well, white can play king to f2 now. If he plays king f2, then black cannot push the pawn because Sui mates himself. So he has to move the king back again. Now what we want to do is we want to guard this square with a knight in such a way that when the king goes here, guard the h2 square, so when the king goes to h1, he can't go to h2, and then you mate him. So we need a square which will guard h2 when he goes to h1, and then we'll checkmate him on g3. Well, that square is f1. So we can't go to f1 right away here, because if we go knight g3, it's stalemate right away. So we need another way to get there. So we play knight c3, king here, and now we play knight to e4. And again, he can't push the pawn because we'll mate him. So he has to play here, and now white plays knight here, and his only legal move is here, and now we're getting here with the right tempos. Knight f1, and now king h2 is illegal. He's in Zugzwang. He has to push the pawn. It's his only legal move, blocking his king in the corner, and checkmate. Let's do that again in slow motion instant replay. Block his king in. He goes here. Keep the king blocked in. He can't go there because you made him. He plays there. White plays to this square. Oops, sorry. Can't go there because the mate, so he has to go here. White plays knight c3. King here, only move. Knight here. Again, he can't play here because of mate. So he has to play here. Knight here. King here. Now we've arrived at our square. He can't play king h2. Pushes the pawn. Checkmate. Okay, our next example is a more practical example. Here, both sides have a minor piece and 4 pawns, but white is way better. Why? Well, first of all, his king is way better. Kings on the average are worth 4¼ pawns in the endgame, and here white's king is worth probably more than that, and black's king is worth a little less than that. But also, white has a very good knight. He has a lot of good squares like f5 and d5, and black has a very bad bishop that's blocked in by all his own pawns. All this adds up to enough that white should be able to win, but how does he do it? Well, let's follow the notes in the book for the game. White plays king c7. So what he's threatening to do is just bring his king all the way in here and win everything. So black can't let him do that. He either has to play bishop f6 or king e7. But if he plays king e7, white can check with the knight, take the bishop, take the pawn here, and Zugzwang black. If you don't believe me, let's do it. Knight checks, king here, knight takes, king here, king here, king here. How do we win? King d5, Zugzwang. He has to move away from his pawn. We're going to win the pawn. We could go over and win some more pawns, or we could push this pawn up and then win pawns. For instance, king f7, king takes, king here, king here, king here. Now we could play f4 and create more trade-off pawns and create more pawns, or we could just play pawn here, king here, and now while he's busy getting this pawn, king here, king here, king takes, king takes, king here, and white wins easily. All right, so after king here, if black wants to keep white from coming in, he'd have to play bishop f6. So in the game, he did play bishop f6. They mention that there's other moves that black could play. So, but they all lose. So we'll just play in the move from the book. So now knight d5, again threatening to take off the bishop. Bishop e7 just waiting, saying, I'm going to keep the king from coming in. But if you take me now, I can take back, and then you can't put me in Zugzwang anymore. For instance, knight takes, king here, king here, king here. In fact, black could even look, could I push this pawn and get something going? So white can't do that. It's too early to cash in. So here, white wants to play king c8. And now again, bishop here would lose to knight takes, king here. And white's just winning this pawn, because if he pushes the pawn, he just takes it off. So he can't do that. What can he do? So he tries to wait and play king e7, king f7, king d7, bishop f8, and now the knight just comes back and says, I'm going to reposition myself where I'm hitting multiple pawns. Knight e3, bishop e7, knight f5, bishop f8, and again, king here. Now bishop checks is not possible because knight takes e7, but black has to make a move. What's he going to do? If he moves the bishop to g7, we can take it and come up and win the d pawn again. So that's pretty hopeless. But what else can he do? He can move the king away. Let's say he plays king f6. Okay, then white keeps making progress. King e8, bishop g7, and here we go again. We take it off. But why does he play bishop g7? Because it's the only safe-looking move on the board. If he plays king to e6, then king takes, and pawn here is hopeless. We can just take it off and then take this pawn and get a queen. Very easy here. So the problem is black's getting into Zugzwang again in this position. If he plays the desperate d5, then white can just take. And now if black says, I'll move the bishop out, there's no targets for it, we can just push this pawn in and win the bishop and then win the endgame again. So this is winning. So again, very practical. Let's do one more. Okay, in this position, it's white to play. This is kind of a famous position. It always makes an impression on people who haven't seen it. And this is why, you know, people who study chess and play over lots of annotated master games, play over lots of puzzles, see lots of ideas. You generate ideas when you play chess and you get an idea what the pieces can do. Right now, white would be very, very happy with a draw. He would love to be able to say, hey, I have a queen, you have a queen and two pawns. If I can just get a perpetual check and go home, I'll take it. But it actually is white to play and win. Well, how could that possibly be? Well, you start with queen f4 check. All right, well, this is not Zugzwang because black obviously only has one move, but he's perfectly happy to do it. He says, let's trade queens and then I win. If queen takes queen, then of course black would take with the king and have connected passed pawns and win the game. So white can't trade. But what can he do? Well, he can play a move like queen to e3. All right, big deal. What's that do? Doesn't seem to do much of anything. We're not threatening check here. We're not threatening check here. If we check on f2, he'll just run back this way. And, you know, maybe we could check again and try to get a draw, but he's going to run back into the middle of the board. So it looks like in this position that white's not threatening anything. Well, it's true that white's not threatening anything. The problem with black's position is that he's in Zugzwang. He can't really do anything here. Let's take all the arrows off the board. Let's try everything. Suppose we push a pawn. Then white's going to check on e1 or f2. Black's going to put the queen in the way and we'll take it checkmate. All right, well, that was a dumb idea, black. How about moving the king? Well, we don't have any king moves. Well, we got a million queen moves. But if we move the queen down the board, he'll just take our queen off and check us. So he can't move the queen to the third or to second rank. He can move the queen to the first rank, but if he moves the queen this far away, I have a checkmate pattern, queen to g3. So now we know he needs to keep the queen guarding this square because it's going to be checkmate. Well, he can't obviously play queen f4 because it's checkmate because he'll take it. So we need a better move. Well, what else do we got? How about queen to g5? But then the king can't go to that square and queen h3 is checkmate. So believe it or not, in this position, white is winning. He plays queen f4 check, black plays queen to g4, and you play queen e3. Now, if black could pass here and say, I pass, you're not threatening anything, then white would be very happy to even try to get a draw. The problem is black's very, very awkward. His king is in a bad spot. His pawns are in very bad spots for the king. And every move that black has, you know, creates hairy-carry here for him. So he's in Zugzwang. He has to move, and every move he has makes his position worse. That's the very essence of Zugzwang when you use it correctly. And very many endgames, as I said earlier in the video, cannot be won without using some form of Zugzwang. This is an extreme form here that white is actually winning this position. Very amazing, but it does happen. So in 97% or 98% of positions, it's better for you to have the move. You'd rather be the one moving. If you pass, then that gives your opponent extra chances to do things. For instance, at the start of the game, white wants to be white and he wants to move here, and now black wants to make a move and try to get back in the game. If black says, I refuse to move, white's very happy. White says, you want to give me more moves? Okay, sure. You want to let me keep moving? I'll keep moving and keep getting more and more power on the board and more strength with each move. So here, having the move is a big advantage. One of the things you often hear is, Morphy gave his opponent the odds of pawn and a move. What does pawn and a move mean? It means he took black, he took a pawn off the board, and he gave white an extra move so that white could open the game like this, and black's down a pawn and white has an extra move. So this is the old pawn and move advantage. And of course, that's a big advantage for white. But, if you're Paul Morphy and you're playing some average guy, then you can afford to give him odds like this. But normally, as I said, having the move is an advantage. You want to do things with your move that get your position better. Now, does it really improve your position? Well, we talked about this in other videos. If you go to my website or you Google Steinitz, Zermelo, and Elkies, which is an article I wrote for Chess Cafe, Steinitz, Zermelo, and Elkies, it's on my website. I talk about the fact that when you make a move in chess, you really can't, quote, improve your position. What you can do is make your position more mobile. You can do more things with your position. But you can't make a move and make your position go from a draw to a win, or a loss to a draw, or a loss to a win. Only your opponent can do that by making a mistake. If your position is drawn, then that means your best move is a draw, and you can't create a win with a good move. But can you make your position, quote, better by, for instance, playing e4 so that you can bring more pieces out and control the center and things like that? And the answer is, well, yes. If you're using that kind of definition, of course you can make your position, quote, better. But if you look at the engine, every time an engine makes a move, his number doesn't go up. If Stockfish says it's white's move and white's ahead by 0.6, he's ahead by 0.6 because his best move leaves him ahead by 0.6. And when he makes that move, Stockfish, unless he sees something further and further down the line, is going to still say that white's ahead by 0.6. It's only when your opponent makes a mistake that that number goes up. When you watch that thermometer in the games, then you'll see the only time that thermometer moves in your favor or in one side's favor is when the other side makes the mistake, not when the one side makes a brilliant move. Anyway, so today we've talked about Zugzwang. Please tell your friends about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess. You can subscribe to the video, or you can like the video as well. They're all great. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.